Hello, this is Choralosophy with Chris Muntz, and I'm Maria Ellis.
Hello, and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is Chris Muntz, and this is episode 139, Digging into National ACDA. Last week, I attended the first national gathering of the American Choral Directors since 2019. I had some incredible experiences, saw incredible choirs, heard wonderful and challenging thoughts presented in PD sessions, and so much more. Great social time, got to meet a lot of folks in the audience, which was incredible. I'll talk more about that later. In this episode, I will recap my highlights, as well as presenting the highlights of some conference attendees that I interviewed during my takeover of the KI Concerts booth. And of course, as you would expect on the Choralosophy Podcast, I will philosophize a bit about the ideas that I heard there, as well as the many conversations that I heard from people on the street during the convention. I asked the people at the booth many questions about their convention highlights. I kind of focused on what their favorite things were, as well as the idea that in this time of teacher burnout, which is so high and prevalent right now, in what ways does convention attendance inspire them when they go back to their rehearsals? You will also hear me reflect on the role this show serves in the landscape of choral thought development and practices based on these conversations that I had in person with listeners. It was a fantastic convention, and I am excited to share thoughts with you that you won't hear anywhere else. A quick heads up that there will be a few different audio sources in this episode, because when I got back to Kansas City from the convention on Sunday, I hit the ground running, being super busy, and jumping right back into my 13-hour workday that happens on Monday, and had to get the show ready to produce and be out today. And so I recorded in my car, I recorded, of course, at the booth at the convention center, and then right back here in my studio. So apologies if you have to turn your volume up and down a little bit in this one, but I'll try to make it worth it. Don't forget, there are some really easy and crucial ways that you can help this show survive. One of them is by scratching my back while I scratch yours. I have arranged with several companies for you to be able to put Choralosophy into their checkout code and get discounts on awesome and really important choral products that make your job easier. Sight Reading Factory, obviously a must. Enter Choralosophy at checkout there. I just welcomed Voce Vista Video back onto the show. Choralosophy.com/voce-vista. The module is right there where you can click through my website, buy that software, and then enter Choralosophy at checkout to get a discount. And you can show all of your students their actual sound waves with overtones and vowel shapes in real time. It's an incredible software. Go check that out. Also at mymusicfolders.com, ryanmain.com, and graphitepublishing.com, you can get a discount there with that Choralosophy checkout code. It's also incredibly important if you want to see this show survive and thrive into the next decade or whatever it is. I love doing this show. I want to keep doing it forever, but I need your help. Go over to patreon.com/Choralosophy and subscribe there. Instead of hearing the show for free all the time, you could pay for it. That's hilarious, right? But people do. And it's a growing number of folks over there who appreciate this content being free and being available and want to help me make this show. So that's a way for as little as $3 a month to go over there and help us out. The producers at Patreon are Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Jonah Clixbull, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. So I am headed back to school on Monday morning immediately following the ACDA National Convention. And so for those of you who did not get to go, this is going to serve as a kind of a reporting on my perception of the convention. Things that I saw, things that I thought were fascinating, some philosophical thoughts, as you probably would have come to expect from this show, on the goals of the convention and how it all shook out as I was there. And so as we head back to our choirs after these conventions, whether it be your state or your regional or a national convention or NAFME or anything like that we're a part of, what are the mindset shifts that oftentimes have to happen? And I don't know if I'm the only one, but I know that sometimes it takes me a few minutes or a few kind of rewirings of my brain to leave convention mindset and return to the real world mindset, right? Where when we're at a convention, we're on a high of inspiration enjoyment, all of the tough things about our jobs kind of go to the side because we're not at our jobs anymore. We're socializing and interacting with colleagues. We're hitting the bar after work. We're doing all the things that are that we get to do on a vacation, but it's like a choir vacation where we are fully immersed in our world, right? And then we go back into the real world, which is our choirs full of people who don't live in our world, right? So, and I think this is something that I think we should think about and talk about more, which is the difference between how us as choral musicians talk about, discuss, think about, and communicate about choral music versus the way that our singers, most of whom who are not immersed in choral music, because they show up to us for the hour a week or the 2 hours a week or whatever it is, and then they go off and do all the other things that they do. They're not choral professionals in most cases. So how does that change how they think about their choir experience versus how we think of it? And so for me, that's kind of my mindset shift when I go back into the classroom, as I'm on my way there right now. What experiences from the convention would be relevant to my classroom for the kids to know about, for the kids to experience when I get back, versus which ones just should happily stay in the realm of theoretical choir nerdery, right? And that's going to be a different answer for everybody, right? Depending on how your classroom or your community organization or church choir runs, certain things will be relevant to you from the convention and certain things won't. And I think that is important background for this episode, where I'm going to recap the ACDA convention in kind of a philosophical overview kind of a way. So the first real reflection from the convention that I'm going to share with you is related to what I learned and discovered by just talking to people as I walked around the convention. And it's kind of awkward for me to share this, but I guess I'm well known now in choral spheres for just speaking my mind, so I'm going to try to just do that. And one of those observations that I made is that this show is really making a difference. And it's humbling, it's exciting, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around exactly the role that this show is developing kind of a mind of its own out there in the listener world. So here's how I'm going to kind of approach this. In 2022, February, I went to Southern ACDA. And at that point, a year ago, I got recognized from doing the show and, a bit. And people were really excited to meet the guy from the podcast. And that was cool. But this year, in 2023, it was like all the time. I couldn't walk anywhere without having somebody come up. And this is not a complaint, by the way. This was really cool, but it makes me feel uncomfortable because ultimately I'm just a colleague. I'm just one of you guys. I'm a choir director. That's my main thing. In fact, I had to joke with a few people at the convention introducing me as that podcast guy, to remind them, I'm actually also a choir director. In fact, my main job is as a choir director. This is something I do a few hours of each week. It's just that's what you see me do, and that's what you hear me do, right? So I was, of course, good-natured about that the whole time, but it was, rather than 15 or 20 people a year ago coming up to me to say hello, it was more like 100 people, and it was pretty much every time I went in and out of a space. And what the message was took on some themes from all the folks that came up to talk to me. And as you hear me saying this, if it was one of you that came up and talked to me, thank you. It actually means a lot to me to hear people and to see people come up and shake my hand and thank me for doing this show, because it's a lot of work and it's also a lot of grief. I take a lot of grief, and I organize a lot of thinking and philosophizing about what it is that we do behind the scenes so that I can try to present it cohesively to you. And so when people came up and thanked me for doing the show, told me that it was making a difference in their classrooms, told me that another theme that I heard was, thank you for saying a lot of the things that we're all thinking, but don't have the guts to say. I heard that a lot. And I knew that was probably the case, But oftentimes, the thanks that I get for doing this show is in the form of a private social media message. The vast majority of the people who support what it is that I'm doing don't do it in a public way. And that's fine. I'm not begrudging anyone the way they choose to communicate on their social media. But for me, the National Convention was cathartic in that way because it put faces with all of you who are out there. You hear my voice and the voice of my guest, whoever it happens to be, but I don't see you and I don't hear you, the listener. And so that was at a national convention, at an in-person event, that provided me really the first time since I started the show in 2019, the opportunity to put faces with the listeners out there in large numbers. Right? I did the Choralosophy convention a few years back. That was a really cool way to meet some actual people that listen to the show, actual humans. But this was different, and this was above and beyond. And it made me reflect a lot, having that many faces and that many hands to shake over the course of the week. It made me reflect a lot about the role that this show is taking on. And I would be interested in hearing people reach out and write me about these things. And what do you think the show is doing in the choral landscape? But for me, with the number of people that said, thank you for saying the things that we're all thinking, but don't have the guts to say, tells me that there is a problem that this show is addressing. And that problem was on display in some ways at the ACDA convention. There was this convention did approach issues of diversity and inclusion, which needs to be approached, but it approached it all from a very similar way. There was not a lot of ideological diversity presented at this convention. There was a certain way of approaching and talking about and dealing with diversity-related issues from a particular perspective. And of course, everyone who listens to this show knows that I have a different perspective. I'm of the mind that the way you evaluate whether or not a policy or a procedure or way of running your choir is promoting diversity is results afterwards. It's not based on the lingo of the policy or even the intent of the policy. It's what happens with the actual humans in the room. Are we responding to the actual humans in the room, or are we pulling something out of theory, out of the textbook that we read, or out of the DEI training that we went to, and then applying it to the classroom without being responsive to who is actually in there and what they are saying and doing? So let me give you an example. The way we use gendered language. Are we going to eliminate it from all group settings? Well, I happen to be sitting on some survey data of a couple hundred choral directors. The vast majority of you out there in the choral world, and I've run this survey several times now, I've probably got 400 or 500 data points sample size on this. About 80% of choral directors are not on board with eliminating gendered language from a choral rehearsal. If that might surprise you, because at the convention we hear a different perspective, and exclusively we hear this perspective of it needs to be eliminated. We should use gender neutral all the time, and it's fine for you to have that opinion. But what I'm saying is, based on sample size of about 400 or 500 people that I've surveyed, that is a minority opinion. The majority opinion runs along a vast majority, and it runs something like this. We should be sensitive to who is in our rooms, and we should adjust our use of gendered language accordingly to who's in our rooms. That was the majority answer by a lot. The other choice, by the way, in the survey was, just use whatever language you want. It's not a big deal. That was, and I think all of the people who approach this topic will be glad to know that was a very tiny percentage of the people that don't think that we should even adjust our language at all, and it's just, whatever you always say is fine. No, the vast majority, the most popular answer, and every time I've run the poll, is no, let's not eliminate it. Let's not eliminate saying guys and girls. Let's not eliminate saying dudes and bros and ladies. But let's be sensitive to how and when we use it based on the context that we're in, based on who's in the room, and whether or not we're using language that locks into the way that they identify. Okay, so that's just one example. There are many ways to think about and talk about that topic. So when I talk about ideological diversity on the show, to truly be able to banter ideas back and forth, we need a space that has ideological diversity as well. So probably the thing that jumps to my mind right away as being a highlight was Andre Thomas's session on spirituals. It was supposed to be Andre Thomas and Alice Parker, but sadly she had injured herself and was not able to make it in person. But they showed a video, which you can go to melodiousacord.com and see now for free, by the way. Highly recommend going and watching that video. It was an interview between Andre and Alice about the history and development and creation of our body of choral arrangements of spirituals. And that was a fascinating conversation and really important on many levels. For those of you who listen to a lot of the episodes on this show that deal with the intersection between culture, race, and music, you would understand probably why I was snapping my fingers and clapping and just pumping my fist the whole time that conversation was happening, because I really appreciated the approach first, that music is American history and that we are all Americans here in the U.S. anyway. And for those of you listening from outside of the U.S., this applies to you too, because if you're looking at music from around the world and you look at the African American spiritual from the U.S., that I think it's important that music is also conceived of around the world as American music. Right? It's American music, and American students should be taught that is their American cultural heritage. Now, is there room for nuance in teaching them in what aspects and what communities within America, which is very culturally diverse, that developed, and why did it develop? Of course, yes, absolutely. But we can think on multiple layers, as I say all the time, that is at a fundamental level and a fundamental layer is American music, it's just part of American history, and that white people should be doing it too. White people can learn to understand it. White people can learn to perform it authentically, and white people should not be uncomfortable doing it. Now, they can be uncomfortable doing it if they're unfamiliar with the history, unfamiliar with the process, and I think that's that resource that is now available from Alice and Andre on that video is just absolutely crucial. Everybody should go watch it. Right. I am here with Connor Doran. Did I say it right?
Yep, it's Connor Doran.
Yep, and right. Pull it right up close to your mouth.
Connor Doran.
Connor Doran. And so, Connor, tell everybody about, first, what avenue of choral music did you drive down to get to ACDA's?
Now I work with Albion High School's choral program in Rochester, New York, and I have a fantastic church choir, and so it's a little bit of everything, and musical theater too. I love that.
Okay,
so.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, question for you. We are famously right now in the middle of a big kind of teacher shortage and a teacher burnout time, and people are quitting, and there's all this kind of bad blood about what it means to be a teacher. And since you and I are both teachers, is there anything that you felt or experienced here at ACDA that you feel like is just kind of reigniting any type of passion for the art form? Do you feel inspired? And if so, what are some inspiring things that you've experienced this week?
No, that's a great question. So I think for me, going to the performances has been so encouraging and invigorating. I think I started teaching high school in the pandemic, so masks, and I had 2 hybrid groups and 1 remote group, and just the lack of community. And I think something that's been so wonderful about this has been just that, the reconnecting with friends that you knew pre-pandemic, and getting to hear amazing groups from across North America, and that has been the most wonderful thing about it. And as far as the teacher shortage, kids need us. They really do, and they need choral singing and music to bring them out of that rut. And it's going to take a while, I think, but it's a good job. Yeah, it's a good job that we're doing.
Absolutely. All right, and this is Raymund Ocampo.
Hi,
Did I say it right? Ocampo.
Yes, Ocampo. That's good. Yeah.
Do you anglicize it in that way?
I think my parents did, and that's all I've ever known. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of my fun little jobs that I get to do at my school is I am in charge of the pronouncing of kids' names at graduation.
Oh, that is a hard job.
It is.
I'm not kidding. Yeah.
It is. And so what they do is they send all of the kids with not English-sounding names to me.
Sure.
Because of my choir background, I understand IPA, and I can translate noises into my head pretty well.
Yeah.
And so that's why when I say, do you anglicize it, I kind of got used to asking that question, because when kids, like a lot of times kids with Spanish last names will just anglicize it. And I just want to make sure that, like, is that how you say it?
Yes, Ocampo. Yeah, that's a great question. It is just Ocampo. Yeah, it is. It's one way to be seen, to hear your name spoken correctly, or even spelled correctly. Because I spell my name with a U in the middle, Raymund. And I don't think anyone bad for spelling it incorrectly. But when they do it the first time, you know that they've taken a look, and it's awesome.
Right.
And then
What kind of choir stuff do you do?
Oh yes. So I am the director of choral studies and the department chair for performing arts at Lynn Benton Community College, which is a small 2-year college. Well, there's 6,000 kids at the college, so I don't know what small means anymore. But community college, about an hour 15 south of Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
And I direct an audition to chamber choir, about 20-25 singers, and then a large non-auditioned concert choir. And I am the student advisor or the faculty advisor for the a cappella group, Formal House Party.
That's exciting.
That's their name. They chose their own name. Yeah, that's
very cool. That's very cool. So how about this convention? How have you felt about it? Have you enjoyed yourself?
It's been, this is our first convention back after the pandemic, and I think the gratefulness, I think that's what I feel in the performances, in all of the sessions that we've all gone to. It's just gratefulness for learning, for people presenting, for people performing, just being grateful for all those that have put the time to make this convention possible and to make it meaningful for all of us in one way, shape, or form. So it just emanates that gratefulness throughout this entire convention.
I couldn't say it better myself. I think that's exactly right. I feel the same thing. Now, do you have any big highlights from the week so far? Like, if you had to, what's your big inspiring moment that you had?
I will say, this morning, we talked about this prior to this, but the National Chorus of Korea was something else. I mean, all the performances have been excellent, really spectacular. But man, they were phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal.
What was it about the performance that grabbed you, do you think?
Oh, I think, just the pure sound was both expressive, and just the way they sang was really powerful, and but also they used movement in a very beautiful way. They had a few little pictures in terms of movement, and they shared both language and music throughout their entire program. I just thought that was amazing, and it was just a variety of tempi and variety of everything. It was everything you'd want in a conference program.
Maria Ellis, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks for coming to sit down with me.
It's always good to be with my friends.
Since we've been so busy, this is the first time we've had a chance to talk.
That's true.
And I've got a camera on.
That's true as well.
So I'm doing these little mini interviews here today where I want to know what people are thinking about this convention.
I think this convention is amazing. Number one, because it really feels like a place of belonging, and because it's the first time we've been together since Kansas City. So, the energy of the conference is palpable. Everybody is excited to see everybody, and then with the concerts that's been happening, and with Dr. Ferdinand last night, I'm just done.
Yeah.
I'm done. It was good.
You could stop right now and you'd be fulfilled?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. After last night, very much fulfilled.
So I guess you've already given away the answer to one of your questions, which is I've been asking people highlight moments of the convention so far, and is J Max your big?
J Max was a big highlight moment. Then I saw a session this morning with Dr. Amanda Quist, Dr. Boykin, Dr. Julie Yu, and Linnell Jenkins, and it was all about women and the power of women, and that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Jasmine Fripp had a hip-hop session that I loved, and I had a session, Chris.
Yes.
So my session was about music access, and I just enjoy being with people and being able to teach and everybody get it. So that was a highlight for me too, because even though I had my first national conference during the pandemic, this was the first time that I was on the stage,
Right.
At the conference. So that has been a highlight as well.
So
And then seeing everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, so somebody else that was here and sat down here not too long ago did name your session as one of their highlights.
And let me tell you something that happened last night. That was the first time that ever happened. The choral cookout happened last night.
Yeah.
And that was an affinity space for people who identify as Black or African. And this is the first time that we've had a space like this. And it was phenomenal on so many levels. It was just, as a person of color, we get excited when we see each other, but it's a whole different meaning when you go into a room and there's 150 people who look like you, instead of being at a conference where there's just 10 people
Right.
who look like you. And so we did what we do. We sang.
And I appreciate you sitting down with me.
1,000%. We're friends. Of course, I got you.
Of course. Chris.
Yes.
I'm Chris.
Chris, good afternoon.
Nice
Happy to be
meet
here
you.
with you.
Yes. So tell us who you are.
I'm Chris Brush. I am the performance manager at KI Concerts.
What does that mean?
Well, it means a lot of things. My role includes basically anything to do with a performance that a choir in this case, or bands and instrumental groups that take international tours with KI Concerts. I work with our operators overseas on all aspects of the performances, from securing the venues, renting instruments and arranging transportation, finding exchange ensembles, coordinating repertoire for exchanges for those exchange concerts. So I'm involved in all those bits and pieces. I am I'm the performance department, if there is one at KI. I'm part of a big operations team, but I handle all the performance aspects.
That's very cool. So Jeff Moshur?
Yes, that's right.
Did I pronounce it right?
That's me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you enjoying the convention so far?
So far, so good.
Good.
Fun time.
Give me a highlight. What's been your most inspiring moment?
I think it was the Timber Creek Choir from Texas.
Okay.
At the music hall. That was a phenomenal sound from that program. Really great choir.
That's awesome.
That was
That's
a
good.
highlight for me.
What
Jason
level
Maxford
of choir?
High school.
High school choir. And of course, Jason
from
Max
Texas.
Ferdinand has
Tonight,
been a
it's
popular
tonight.
answer for people who sit down.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So as you came up to the booth here to talk to me, you were talking about fighting literacy battles.
Yeah.
So that's one of my things that, as you know, that I also really get out there and fight. What are some of your struggles in that area?
Similar to most people in the profession, I think practice tracks are so readily available that it's hard not to slip into that, right? And to say, okay, we got a concert coming up, so let's switch over to practice tracks and give those things out there. And I just think there's greater music making to be had out there, and sometimes it's a hard current to fight to not give into that and to really force the literacy thing.
No, absolutely. Probably, I'm assuming your first ACDA
First national, yep.
In person. Do you feel like there's inspiration to go back into your classroom in a way that maybe wasn't quite as real before?
Absolutely. I mean, I think seeing that program from Texas, the Timber Creek High School Chorus, the chamber choir, was truly inspiring and what's possible at the high school level. And so that was an inspiring moment. Chatted with the folks at Sight Reading Factory as well in here, in the exhibits, and they're doing great stuff, and offering a lot of great resources for that sight singing and sight reading kind of work. As well as just chatting with colleagues and talking shop has been a really valuable thing. One of the reasons I stopped to talk with you. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. All right, so I'm here with Johnny Edwards.
Yes,
Johnny, who are you?
I am a choral director in Newton County, Georgia, near Atlanta.
High school chorus. How long have you been doing that?
I've been there since 2016.
Okay.
I'm also a composer, so I get to have my own test choir.
Had you been in other places before? How many years
Oh, yes.
have you been teaching?
I've been teaching over 20 years.
You've been enjoying the convention so far?
Oh, I love the convention.
Give me some highlights.
There, Jason Max Ferdinand's group.
It's going to be a popular answer today for me, I think.
It's phenomenal. Other groups, I hate to leave anyone out, but TCU was the very first group I heard. It's phenomenal. But I really enjoyed, as a composer, talking to other composers. I just left a session talked about publishing.
Yep.
You know, I knew a lot about it, but they kind of went in depth about the process from submitting to after you're accepted and editing. The differences between self-publishing and traditional publishing, and that was very helpful.
And it's something you can only really get at a national convention.
Yes.
I've got one other question for
Okay.
you. So you and I, sounds like, have both been teaching for quite a while, 20-something years.
Yes.
One of the big things on a lot of people's minds right now related to teaching is that it's a hard time to be a teacher. There's a lot of people talking about teacher burnout. There problems in the schools that they're having trouble with. But then when I come to a convention like this, there's a lot of re-inspiring, reinvigorating. Do you ever feel that when you come to a convention?
Yes. I think the thing about to help avoid burnout is to know that we have to evolve. We have to change with the situations. I mean, when I first started teaching, there were no cell phones in the school at all. You know, you never had to worry about telling someone to put their cell phone away. But now that's the norm.
Yeah.
Which is sad. But you have to change with the times. You have to find ways to make your teaching more interesting. What I do in my composing, when I've taken like regular warm-ups with my demographics, I'm taking regular warm-ups and use my composition skills to turn them into hip-hop warm-ups. Just original hip-hop warm-ups.
Yeah.
Kind of just trying to get them, still with straight, but right, correct vowels, correct posture, but you're just going to sing it with a hip-hop beat.
Yeah.
You can sing fa, fe, fi, fo, fu with calypso behind it.
Yeah.
It's just,
you're using a musical language that they know.
Exactly.
To help bridge the gap between another language. It's kind of like, like a Rosetta Stone is?
Yes.
Where it's like, that's what you're doing.
Right.
You're giving a link from their language to a new language.
Right.
That's brilliant.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me, Johnny.
Thank you.
Hey,
wow.
Thank you. Okay, Alan. And it's Alan Denney, who I met like a month ago.
Yes.
In Colorado.
Yes.
Thanks for sitting down.
CMEA.
Very awesome. Why don't you tell everybody what your connection to choral music is? What is your avenue for being here?
Well, I am a
Even closer.
high school and middle school choral director in Estes Park, Colorado. I've been there 18 years. I had a college professor who told me, you need to join ACDA, and it's one of the best moves I think I've ever made because there's just so much support, there's so much camaraderie. There's nothing like it. I've never experienced a conference as motivating as ACDA.
That's great. Have you been to other nationals in the past?
I have. This is, I think, my 5th.
Okay, that's
And
awesome.
I would not miss it.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
Now, what have been some things at this convention that jump out at you as inspirational, exciting? What were some of your favorite things?
Well, I think at the top of the list right off the bat would be the Jason Max Ferdinand singers last night.
I have a feeling that's going to be a popular answer today. Yeah. Oh, I agree. It was definitely something that's hard to describe because you can't compare it to something.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like trying to describe the Mona Lisa or Niagara Falls to someone who's never seen it.
Since you've got some years of experience, not only in ACDA but also some teaching experience behind you, as I do, what does it mean to you to be here at a convention like this? To bring energy back into your classroom, to bring motivation back into your classroom? How do you think of your time at a convention in that way?
Sure. Well, I think it's probably twofold. Number one is I think once you become a member of ACDA, once you kind of get baptized into the choral family, I think you become family. I see people from all over the country that do the same thing I do, and that's incredibly rewarding and motivating simply because you get to share issues with people or problems and hear theirs, that kind of thing. We've all been through COVID, and I think we're all veterans in that regard. But the other thing is just they do such an excellent job of scheduling workshops and sessions that they try to hit a little bit of everything in terms of preparing you to go back.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, it's kind of like the old cliche that you have to be removed from the problem to be able to see it.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right.
I think hearing choirs that are just absolutely phenomenal, the best in the country, some of the world, it's incredibly motivating and reassuring that, this is achievable if you continue to work at it.
Yeah.
The standard is set very high, I think, in terms of performing ensembles for this conference.
Absolutely.
And that is well worth the price of admission, so to speak,
That's awesome.
to be able to hear groups that are just absolutely phenomenal.
I agree. The complete version of those booth interviews at KI Concerts booth can be found on my Patreon page. Subscribers can see the entire conversations that I had with all of those awesome folks. So head over to Patreon if you want that benefit. Ultimately, the art of making choral music is a togetherness art form. You've seen my togetherness activist stuff on the show before. There's actually going to be some more togetherness activism coming up on the show. That's a big deal for me. It's a big philosophical underpinning of why I'm a choral musician. And it has to do with this idea that when I am looking at a group of people, a group of singers in my care, they are all welcome. And that includes the red voters and the blue voters. That includes the trans people, the non-binary people, and the people who very strongly identify with their gender. That includes the people who believe gender is real, and that it's a real meaningful category, and that includes the people who don't. It includes the people who think that America is a fundamentally racist place, that is irredeemably racist, and never and for always will be, and the people who believe that America is a fundamentally good country, that that simply has problems, and and that we should continue to work through those problems. And there are people, and these are just a couple things that people fight about on the internet. And when I'm in the care and caring for a group of singers, I want them all to feel like they belong. And I think sometimes people say that they want all of those people to belong, but really they have preference for the ones that agree with them about some of those fundamental issues. But I think togetherness activism in choral music means no, you really just truly want them all. You want them all, and that there are some ideological issues that might be really important to you to work out, but ultimately us being together here to make this music is the project for right now. And I think, by and large, the ACDA National Convention achieved that because they got us together. They got us socializing again. They got us in the same room, in the same space, clapping for the music. And ultimately, in 99% of the things that happened at the convention, those ideals of togetherness were met. And I am so proud and so privileged to have been there, and so proud of the organization for making some of the leaps forward that it did. Another example of things that I thought were really exciting change this year were the insight choirs and the immersion choirs. And I have not actually been to a lot of ACDA nationals because of my teaching schedule. I think I've only been to 3 since I started teaching. And so forgive me if I am saying this wrong, but I think those were new. The insight choir and the immersion choir. I think those were new. Those, to me, both of those concepts were by far the biggest victories for inclusion that the convention did. Yes, the Jason Max Ferdinand concert was incredible, but those things I think were the biggest victories for inclusion. For example, I could throw that as a contrast. I was a little bit uncomfortable, actually, just kind of thinking about the message of the convention, to have our 2 invited professional choirs sitting across town from each other performing at the same time, one almost entirely white and one almost entirely black, at our inclusion convention and our togetherness belonging convention. Nothing is wrong with either of those choirs. But I wondered if anyone else noticed that. If anyone else noticed that we had kind of created a segregated invited choir dichotomy. Not saying that it was wrong, not saying either of those choirs did anything wrong. I think they're both amazing and fantastic, and the concerts blew my mind. But sometimes I wonder if we're all thinking about these things in this way. And of course, I learned from the convention, from people in person, that actually a lot of people are thinking about stuff like this. I brought up that dichotomy to a lot of people, and everybody goes, "Yep, I noticed that too." And both of those choirs are fantastic. And this is where the tension comes in, right? Where this is, some of you will listen to this and think that I'm like throwing shit at people on the internet. I'm not. I think they're all incredible. Like, they're all awesome. But is that the future that we want? Is that the future that we're working towards? Choirs that are segregated. It's not the future that I want. And in which case we think about, like, okay, is that the future we want? If not, then what are we doing as we move forward to bring everyone together in a way that I believe the immersion choirs did, as a contrast, right? So I look at those immersion choirs, and basically, for those of you who are not there or are not Americans, or, wherever, people could choose to participate in a choir where they spent the entire time there at the convention going periodically to a rehearsal for music, to be immersed in music that is not of their culture. And then they got to perform that music at the end, led by an expert in that cultural music. To me, I was going, oh my goodness, this is it. This is how music becomes inclusive, right? Because I looked up at for example, the African diaspora and the music of the Black tradition. They had an immersion choir, and it was like a good, half or more were white folks up there doing that. And they were, I would argue, authentically performing. Okay. Why? Because they did the work to immerse themselves in a culture that was not their own. And that was a fantastic performance. I caught the second half of the Indigenous Peoples chorus, which was also same concept, just fantastic. And people were so appreciative and so heartfelt. I thought that was incredible. The Insight Choirs concept was also incredible, like a victory for inclusion. Bringing in schools that, because of the infrastructure of their school, might not have ever been included in a national convention in the past. Okay, that's a big deal, because yes, like, I'm super privileged to teach in a school district that supports music, that has feeder programs, and that kids take voice lessons and do all these things. Like, it's awesome for my kids that we have that. I don't feel bad about that. I don't lose sleep because my kids have those things. But at the same time, we have to recognize that because of the luck of birth and where we're born into a zip code, we might not have those opportunities, and it's not something we chose. So how do we figure out a way to get those kids who don't have those opportunities? Let's say they're a choir where there's no feeder, and oftentimes the kids are doing choir for the very first time in 9th, 10th, 11th grade. They're beginners. They're not going to get selected to perform from a blind audition. But that does not mean that there's nothing that they can contribute. I watched one of those sessions, Edrin Coleman's session. It was phenomenal. And I sat there thinking, this is above and beyond excellent work that he is doing with those kids, and teaching them diverse repertoire, teaching them a wide range of literacy skills and vocal techniques and all of the things that I'm teaching my kids, but starting them from scratch and moving them forward, and having the chance to have the insight, which is a brilliant name, right? Because I'm sitting there having the insight into how his classroom runs and how he bridges certain gaps for kids to get them to the point where they can love and feel competent and powerful in a choral ensemble. It was just fantastic. So between, as you heard me in my car, the Andre Thomas session, the insight sessions, the insight choirs, and the immersion choirs, I would call, as far as like did we meet our goal of creating this inclusion convention? Those three things to me were above and beyond, in alignment with how I think of inclusion, because this is just my opinion. This show was my opinion mostly today, along with the opinions of several people that I had a chance to interact with. And so I think that's important, because for just like anything, when I had a chance to talk to Robin Hilger several episodes back, who runs the organization, we talked about how no attempt to try to make a better, more inclusive choral landscape is going to be perfect. But we have to start. We have to jump in and try things. And will there be things that maybe you're like, oh, that didn't land quite as well as we would have wanted it to land. That is not nitpicking. That is simply like when I criticize, I'm criticizing from within the organization, within the choral profession, wanting us to continue to do these things and continue to do them better, but also with a philosophically reflective approach. It should be okay to question, and it should be okay to suggest that something done, even in the name of inclusion, might actually be wrong. And I think that is necessary. It's crucial. It's actually helping the cause, not hurting the cause, to approach those things. So I would love it if you guys reached out, sent me some questions, responded with the things that you thought were fantastic about the convention if you went, if you saw certain things on social media because you didn't go. That would also be interesting to have your commentary. And of course, you can leave that at choralosophy@gmail.com on an email, or you can join the Choralosophers Facebook page and be part of that conversation. As I always say, it's the least toxic page on Facebook for choir directors. So go there and join if you haven't already. And of course, on the way out, make sure you hit your Choralosophy discount code at vocevista.com, sightreadingfactory.com, mymusicfolders.com, ryanmain.com, and graphitepublishing.com. And join the Patreon, patreon.com/Choralosophy. Help me keep spreading this word. Help me keep spreading the idea that it's okay that we don't all agree about stuff, but we are going to be together to make music anyway. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next time.